back to the Daily Grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
And it's time to get to the UFC Fight Night Werdum vs. Tybura predictions in Sydney, Australia. Let's fucking go. This card was supposed to be headlined by Mark Hunt, but as you may be aware of the controversy, Mark Hunt did an interview which got him pulled from the fight. The UFC said that they used that interview, as the reason to pull him from the fight. They used his words against him because Mark Hunt was talking about the fact that he could not, he was starting to slur his words and forget things that happened yesterday and stuff like that. So there was a lot of controversy in that. This is Sydney, Australia, Mark Hunt, close to Mark Hunt's home. So he got pulled from the main event and replaced with his mortal enemy, Fabricio Werdum. Fabricio Werdum was actually one of Mark Hunt's targets. Mark Hunt wanted to fight Fabricio Werdum at this card in the main event, but Fabricio lamented the fact that he didn't like fighting overseas because it cost a lot of money to bring his whole camp over there. Well, when Mark Hunt was pulled, none other than Fabricio took it upon himself to bring his camp overseas. But this is kind of short notice, and I don't know, maybe Fabricio feels like the risk is a little bit lower than if you were fighting Mark Hunt, so maybe he doesn't have to bring as much of his team. Maybe he's like, I got this, guys. I'm not fighting Mark Hunt, I'm fighting Marcin Tybura. So I'm gonna leave about 10 of you guys home because I can't afford that shit. I'll be right back though, because we'll get in. Spoiler alert, a lot of you guys probably have this. I guess I'll just predict this one first. Fabricio Werdum, I've got him beating Marcin Tybura, and when you do the research, it's really kind of, I'll just put it this way. Fabricio, I believe, might have seen something in Marcin Tybura for him to change his, not liking to go overseas, specifically to Sydney, to fight Mark Hunt. So he's fighting Marcin Tybura, and you could say, well, he's probably doing this just in spite of Mark Hunt, just to piss off Mark Hunt, because Hunt called Fabricio Werdum like a dog shit coward for not coming over to fight him and taking a fight with Derek Lewis instead. Well, Fabricio Werdum, he just fought last month. He fought UFC 216, and he fought Walt Harris. He had a flawless victory versus Walt Harris. He was supposed to fight Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis had to pull out last minute. So Fabricio Werdum fought Walt Harris, who came up off the undercard. Fabricio Werdum, I think he absorbed 0 strikes. He took down Walt Harris, made easy work of him with a submission. It was a flawless victory, and so now he's ready to fight again 1 month later versus Marcin Tybura. Marcin Tybura is 16-2. He's also, I believe, 11 years Fabricio's, younger than Fabricio. But Fabricio Werdum is a higher caliber fighter than anybody Marcin Tybura has faced thus far. Marcin Tybura is only 3-1 in the UFC. Fabricio is 10-4 in the UFC. He's got a lot more UFC experience. Fabricio Werdum is literally, it's arguable, but I would not be mad if you argued Fabricio as the greatest heavyweight of all time. Stipe is working on it, but Fabricio Werdum is 10-2, or he's 8-2 in his last 10 fights, and one of those losses was the controversial majority decision to Alistair Overeem. The only other loss in Fabricio's last 10 heavyweight fights was to Stipe Miocic, the champion. And you have to think, this is heavyweight. 1 inch can lose you a fight in heavyweight. Talk about a puncher's chance. These guys are swinging the most, power in the UFC. Just logically, it's the heavyweight division. So if you get caught by one of these heavyweights, you could easily go night-night. Fabricio, who's 40 years old now, has still made, he's still managed to go arguably 9-1 in his last 10 fights. He lost versus Alistair Overeem, and, out of Fabricio Werdum's last losses, 2 of them were to Alistair Overeem. In both of his losses to Alistair Overeem, he outstruck Alistair and scored more takedowns than Alistair, but Alistair got the decision. And I watched the last fight, and I, felt like Fabricio won the fight, but he didn't get rewarded. He didn't get the finish, even though he had Alistair hurt. But he didn't get the finish, and they say never leave it in the judge's hands. Well, Fabricio arguably got robbed twice versus Alistair, and he actually has a win over Alistair. So he won his first time fighting Alistair. The next 2 times, you can arguably say, he could be 3-0 versus Alistair. So he's also got a win over Fedor Emelianenko, win over Cain Velasquez. You know what I'm saying? Fabricio has fought the best of the best. He's got wins over the best of the best. He's one of the most experienced, former UFC heavyweight champion, and he's fighting Marcin Tybura, who is 3-1 in the UFC. His loss was his UFC debut to Timothy Johnson, and since then he's went on, and his most notable win is over Andrei Arlovski in his last fight. And in Andrei Arlovski is 0-5 in his last 5 fights. His last loss was to Tybura, and Tybura was the only guy out of Andrei Arlovski's last 5 opponents that did not get the finish on Arlovski. So I just feel like Fabricio is gonna win this fight, but I also felt like Rose Namajunas was, I also felt like Joanna was going to beat Rose, like a lot of people. So anything can happen. This is MMA. Just because Fabricio is one of the best heavyweights we've ever seen does not mean Marcin Tybura cannot win the fight. But I'm picking Fabricio with all of that being said. So usually I start at the bottom of the card, but there I started with Fabricio. I guess we'll just fucking go in reverse this time. So I'll go to Bec Rawlings versus Joanne Calderwood next. So, this fight, I'm predicting Joanne to get the win. Now, I know I'm going to get at least one of these. I'm telling you right now, I know I'm going to get at least one of these predictions wrong. Because now, if Mark Hunt was on the card versus Tybura, I would have been predicting Mark Hunt to get the win. And, this is his hometown. So, at least I would have had one home fighter winning. But with Mark Hunt not on the card, the other 3 fighters that, you would consider Sydney their home, they're fighting out of either New Zealand or Australia, are Daniel Kelly. So we've got Bec Rawlings, Daniel Kelly, and Volkanovski. So I've got all of them you see losing. So it's hard for me to really pick all 3 hometown people on the main card losing, but that's just what my brain had, doing the research. I don't know which one of these fighters is going to get the hometown surge and fucking, the crowd get behind them and actually pull it off. But if you're just going off of a neutral field, I have actually them losing the fights. Starting with Rowdy Bec Rawlings. Now, she's fighting Joanne Calderwood. But Bec Rawlings, she's 7-6, 2-3 in the UFC, so she's got a losing UFC record. And if she loses this fight, she'll have a 500 just record overall. Bec Rawlings is on a 2-fight losing streak. Actually, both of these girls are on a 2-fight losing streak. Bec Rawlings' wins are over Sohee Ham and Lisa Ellis. Sohee Ham it also has a loss to Joanne Calderwood. So both of these girls have beat Sohee Ham, and Bec Rawlings' other UFC win was over Lisa Ellis, who was 0-3 in the UFC, never won in the UFC. So those were Bec Rawlings' 2 wins. Now go to Joanne Calderwood, who's 11-3, so she's got a lot better record. Her UFC record's pretty similar, though. She's 3-3 in the UFC, Joanne Calderwood. But she's more experienced overall, and she's also on a 2-fight losing streak. But her 2 losses, she had a controversial loss to Cynthia Calvillo. A lot of people actually had Joanne Calderwood winning that fight, and her other loss was to mini cyborg Jessica Andrade. So I feel like Joanne Calderwood's her opponents have, they're more experienced. She's lost to higher quality opponents. So I'm picking Joanne Calderwood to come out here and get this win in the co-main event versus Rowdy Bec. I was about to call her fucking Rowdy Bec Rawlings. Next, we're going to Tim Means versus Belal Muhammad. In this fight, I'm going with the Dirty Bird Tim Means, man. I gotta go with the Dirty Bird. Tim Means is a lot more. He has a lot more experience than Belal Muhammad. Tim Means has almost 40 fights professional. He's got, what is that? Like 26 professional fights. He's got 15 professional UFC fights. So Tim Means is a lot more experienced here. I'm picking him to win this fight with experience. Although Belal has shown strong wrestling in his last 3 UFC fights, and Tim Means has had a susceptibility to takedowns, Tim Means is a more crafty veteran. He's got and he, even when he gets taken down, he gets back up. He's got some vicious strikes, man. And I just believe that he's Tim Means is on a higher level than anybody that Bilal Muhammad has faced thus far. So I'm going with Tim Means to win this fight. I almost picked Bilal, but then I thought about it a little longer, and I was like, man, just the experience, I got to go with Tim Means. So I'm actually pretty confident in the Tim Means pick. So next we move down to Elias Theodoru versus Daniel Kelly. Man, this one was hard for me to pick too, man, because I feel like I'm picking Theodoro, but it was kind of hard for me. Daniel Kelly is, on the tail end of his career. He's 40 years old. He's got wins over Rashad Evans, Chris Camozzi, he was on a 4-fight winning streak before he got knocked out by Derek Brunson in the first round in his last fight. But in that 4-fight winning streak, Daniel Kelly had a win over Rashad, I believe it was a split decision, but, watching the fight, I felt like it was unanimous. But it's fair. Rashad Evans, he hasn't been doing too well lately. So Daniel Kelly is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's got wins over Rashad, Chris Camozzi, Shoeface. It's hard for me to pick Daniel Kelly here, especially because he's at home, and I already lamented the fact that I don't like picking against everybody that's at home on this card, because that usually doesn't play out like that. Usually, at least, even if it goes to decision, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes there's a little home cooking. So that's why even if I feel like these guys might win the fight, they might lose to the judges. So it's hard for me to really pick against all of these guys, but that's what I'm fucking doing. It's not that serious. So I'm picking Daniel Kelly to lose fight. Daniel Kelly's 13-2 overall, 6-2 in the UFC. He's 40 years old. Elias Theodoro is 14-2, 5-2 in the UFC. And I believe Elias is just a little bit tougher than Daniel Kelly's, most recent competition in his 4-fight winning streak. Not Derek Brunson, but that fight didn't go his way. But, versus Rashad Evans and Chris Camozzi. In the Shoeface fight, Shoeface, I believe, was actually winning, but he ended up finishing Shoeface, so he got the win. But I just feel like Elias Theodoro is going to be a little bit harder to deal with than Daniel Kelly's most recent opponents, other than Derek Brunson. So I'm picking Elias to get the win, but like I said, Daniel Kelly has surprised me before. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in here and gets the win. So it is what it is. On to the last fight of the night, which will actually be the first fight of the main card. Bandonnet versus Volkanovski, man. Umberto Bandonnet, man. Bandonnet, a lot of people don't really know who he is, but I remember him because in his last fight, it was his UFC debut. He still had, the black face when they don't have their picture up yet. Now they've got his picture up. And this is really, really a tough call. You don't understand, because he's going against Volkanovski, who is fighting at home. He's from Australia, and Volkanovski only has one professional loss. So if this goes to decision, it can really easily go Volkanovski's way. But Bandonnet, man, let me tell you about my boy Umberto. Man, he's from Peru. He's not the most popular fighter. His last fight, now let me tell you about the upset kid, my boy. I got my eye on Bandonnet because his last fight was versus Martin Bravo in Mexico City. Martin Bravo was the hometown kid, and Martin Bravo was on an 11-fight winning streak. So he went to Martin Bravo's home and snapped his 11-fight winning streak. Now he's going to Volkanovski's home to snap his 12-fight winning streak. Now, before Bandonnet was snapping streaks in the UFC, two of his last opponents were on 5-fight winning streaks. So Bandonnet, his last 3 opponents have all been on 5-fight winning streaks or higher, and he snapped them all. Bandonet's been under pressure. He's fought at people's home before. His last 6 wins are all finishes. So, you don't want to let it go to decision, but Bandonnet doesn't usually, Umberto doesn't usually let it go to decision. He comes out here and goes for the finish. Umberto has fucking 18 professional fights, and he's only 23 years old. He's on a 6-fight win streak currently, 6 finishes. He's only 23. He just beat Martin Bravo in his home. And when I look at Volkanovski's opponents, I really feel like, none of them are the top in the division, because he's 15-1 and he's still not ranked. So This is it's really hard for me to pick against a guy that's 15-1 at home because, like I said, if it goes to decision, and even if we feel like Humberto might win, they might raise Volkanovski's hand, and that would be my fault for picking him because we know that's a possibility. But Bandonnet can get the finish. If anyone can snap the streak and get the finish in someone's hometown and pull off the upset, I feel like it's Humberto Bandonnet. I mean, I don't know where this kid really came from, but I picked him to win in his UFC debut. He got the win, snapped the streak, and I just remember that moment. So I'm picking him to come in and do it one more time before people really start paying attention to him. And he could lose this fight via, he's still young. If he loses a fight, he'll go to like 18-5, but he's only 23 years old. It's really crazy how young he is and how experienced he already is. He's very active, so I really got my eye a little bit on Bandonnet. I'm looking forward to watching this fight, and I'm picking him to get the upset win on enemy turf. So with that being said, go ahead and fucking laugh in the comments. I don't have any hometown fighters winning, but that's because Mark Hunt got pulled off the card. So I mean, it's just predictions. It is what it is. Let the full-time family know what the fuck you type in the comments. I'm out.
Bye, Felicia.